Prepare for chaos, confusion, and carnage from the spectacular world of IndyCar. These heart-pounding wrecks from America's premier open-wheel series will have you on the edge of your seat, wondering how the drivers survived. So hold on tight, you're watching Racers Reverie, and these are the 20 worst IndyCar crashes ever. First up is this absolutely insane crash from the 2023 season. It was Simon Pagenaud who was on the unfortunate end of this ridiculous roll during practice for the race at Mid-Ohio. The Frenchman had the worst moment in his entire racing career while coming towards turn 4. Flat out at almost 200 miles per hour, he hit the brakes, but nothing happened. And to make matters worse, he was approaching a downhill runoff. He went sideways and his car flew into the air and made a horrible impact off the ground, sending it into one of the craziest barrel rolls ever. After his car was ripped to pieces from the huge impact, he was thrown around like a rag doll, and his car hit the wall after rolling over countless times.
Oh!
Big trouble.
That is Simon Pagenaud barrel rolling.
I had no brakes. I'm okay. I had no brakes.
Oh, that's great to hear that he's okay.
The Indy 500 winner missed the rest of the season due to a concussion, but was lucky to avoid further injury. The second crash on our list is one of the nastiest impacts you will ever see. Fellow Frenchman Sebastien Bourdais was qualifying for the 101st Indianapolis 500 in 2017, pushing as hard as he could to set the fastest lap possible. But he may have pushed a bit too hard, because out of nowhere, disaster struck. He lost control of his car at over 230 miles per hour in the middle of a corner, and it sent him straight into the wall head first. His car was flipped over and caught fire instantly, and the impact was so devastating it could be heard clearly on the video.
Both in the 231s, the first driver to put any lap in the 231. So far, trouble! Oh, what a crash! What a terrible crash!
Up and over, car flipped.
Bourdais suffered fractures to his pelvis and right hip as a result, but was lucky to avoid further injuries in one of the highest speed crashes ever. Next up is a massive pileup that happened in the 2019 race at Pocono Raceway. The three-corner oval isn't nicknamed the Tricky Triangle for nothing, and it proved why on this day in 2019. This pack of cars only got around one corner before chaos broke out, all while traveling at almost 240 miles per hour. Takuma Sato squeezed championship contender Alexander Rossi and caused a huge pileup that also wiped out James Hinchcliffe and Felix Rosenqvist. The damage caused was huge, but the drivers were extremely lucky that nobody was injured in this very nasty crash. One of the special things about the IndyCar series is how they race on ovals, road courses, and street courses, and how all three can be just as thrilling as each other. Take this crash as proof. In 2011, Tony Kanaan avoided serious injury after this brutal crash with fellow Brazilian Hélio Castroneves on the streets of Baltimore. Kanaan's brakes failed at over 180 miles per hour, and he smashed into the back of Castroneves in an unbelievable impact. He went flying over Castroneves' car and plowed through the tire barriers before hitting the concrete wall on the side of the street. Brake failure is never good on a high-speed street track, but on this occasion, both drivers escaped unharmed.
Whoa! Yeah. So Tony Kanaan literally flew over the top of Hélio's car.
Another bone-jarring crash at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway occurred in 2015 during practice for the Indy 500, and it was absolutely massive. Josef Newgarden was finding the limit of his car around the famed speedway, dancing around on the edge of grip, but unfortunately for him, he stepped over the limit, and the consequences were huge. His car oversteered and spun around mid-corner, and with no chance of avoiding the crash, Josef was flung into the wall nose first at 220 miles per hour. The car instantly went airborne and skated down the track a tremendous distance, all while upside down. He was helped from his car and luckily was unhurt. But the same couldn't be said for his race car. By the way, if you'd like to see more of the best motorsports content just like this, please consider liking this video and hitting subscribe for more quality content. Okay, back to the video. Now let's stick with the fan-favorite Indianapolis Motor Speedway for this next crash, because just a year prior, Kurt Busch found out why this oval is just so hard to master. The NASCAR ace was trying his hand at the double, where a driver attempts to race in both the 500-mile Indy 500 IndyCar race and the 600-mile Coke 600 NASCAR Cup race, both on the same day. Perhaps all the practice had put Busch off his A-game, but either way, during Indy 500 practice, he suffered a massive shunt coming out of turn 2. He hit the wall at unbelievable speed and his car shattered on impact, catching fire in the process. It shed bodywork and even a wheel before coming to rest on the grass further up the track. Somehow, Busch managed to climb out of the car and came back for more as soon as his car was fixed. In case you were wondering, Indianapolis Motor Speedway isn't the only high-speed oval that can cause chaos. Just ask Ryan Briscoe and Ryan Hunter-Reay. The pair were racing each other hard at the Auto Club Speedway, affectionately referred to as Fontana, at this barn-burning race in 2015, which many fans refer to as the greatest IndyCar race ever. But, coming on to the very last lap, Ryan Briscoe and Ryan Hunter-Reay came together dramatically at well over 220 miles per hour, causing an absolutely spectacular crash. They were forced onto the grass, and Briscoe's car went airborne in the biggest way possible. It flipped and smashed off the ground, breaking apart in what resembled an airplane crash more than a car crash. Debris was littered absolutely everywhere, but somehow both drivers were okay. Sadly though, this iconic track is currently being demolished, but maybe the two Ryans won't be too sad to hear that news. This next crash is courtesy of a road course, Sonoma Raceway in California to be exact, and is a look back at one of the scariest moments of Nelson Philippe's racing career. Philippe spun on this blind crest and his car skidded down the track, coming to rest at the worst possible place, right at the apex on the racing line. EJ Viso came over the hill next and hit Philippe's front wing, causing some damage and leaving everyone thinking how lucky they were that Viso did not hit him harder. But then came Will Power. The Aussie came at tremendous speed and had no chance of avoiding Philippe, and smashed straight into the side of him, causing a horrific crash. Philippe's car was absolutely destroyed from the huge impact, in one of the most horrible side-on collisions you will ever see. The Texas Motor Speedway track produced some unbelievably exciting races over the years, with drivers often racing side by side for prolonged distances thanks to its layout. But with that exhilarating racing style comes extreme danger, something that drivers Josef Newgarden and Connor Daly found out the hard way in 2016. Connor Daly lost control of his car and had a massive snap coming out of a corner, and unfortunately for Josef Newgarden, he was driving right beside him. Connor crashed straight into Josef and punted him straight into the wall at over 220 miles per hour. Newgarden hit the wall at a horrible angle and got turned upside down. His head barely missed the barrier when his car rode along the wall at incredible speed, and when he got out of the car, he couldn't stand up. This was truly one of the most breathtaking crashes in modern-day IndyCar. Well, just when you think that they can't get any scarier, have a look at this. The 2010 Indy 500 was a thrilling race, and on the very last lap, Mike Conway attempted an overtake on Ryan Hunter-Reay, but it went horribly wrong. He drove into the back of Captain America's car, which instantly sent him flying into the air backwards and heading straight for the wall. He hit the catch fencing and the wall at the same time at a terrible angle, and it shredded his car to pieces, firing him back out onto the track upside down. With nothing but the cockpit itself surrounding Conway, his car spiraled across the track, barely missing Hunter Ray's head as it landed. Both drivers were incredibly lucky to avoid serious injury after this brutal wreck. People in the automotive world are familiar with the name Carroll Shelby, the car designer most famous for the AC Cobra and the Ford Mustang. But what you may not know is that his son Patrick Shelby was a race car driver. Patrick competed in IndyCar, but this moment in the 1986 race at Laguna Seca wasn't one of his finest. He was racing side by side with Mike Buckingham and made a mistake by moving across the track, hitting Buckingham's car in the process. Shelby got fired straight into the guardrail at unbelievable speed, and his car almost disintegrated on impact due to the severity of the crash. Safety features were not the finest back then, but he somehow avoided serious injury in this extraordinary smash. Another famous name, and perhaps the most famous of all, is Mario Andretti, known for his influence in taking motorsports from being a relatively unknown sport into the mainstream. The legendary driver had been retired for 6 years, but in 2003 he decided to chance a comeback. At age 63, while practicing for the 2003 Indy 500. Mario was minding his own business at over 220 miles per hour, but his car had other ideas. He hit debris from another incident, and his car suddenly went airborne out of nowhere, and Mario suffered an outrageous crash, with his car flipping 6 times.
While running at 220 miles an hour, and he hit some debris, and then he held on. He rode out one spectacular crash.
Mario had been doing very well until this crash, but he was very fortunate to avoid injury in this shocking shunt. Let's stick with the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for this next one, for what is definitely one of the most disturbing crashes the track has ever seen. In 2015, James Hinchcliffe was practicing for the Indy 500, and everything was going smoothly for the Canadian until it wasn't. While entering Turn 3, Hinchcliffe's front right suspension decided it had enough and completely collapsed, sending James directly into the wall at over 230 miles per hour. It made a sickening impact against the wall, as flames instantly erupted from the car in a horrible turn of events. James was rushed to hospital and his heart flatlined, but he was brought back to life just in time. And in one of the most incredible stories ever, he returned to the Indy 500 the following year and took pole position. More super speedway mayhem occurred in Kentucky during the 2007 installation of the high-speed oval. Racing legend Dario Franchitti finished the race in 8th place, and while he wasn't happy with that result, it was only a small disappointment in comparison to what happened after the race had finished. As the checkered flag was waved, Dario didn't realize the race was over and drove straight into the back of Dan Weldon, sending him somersaulting through the air in a spectacular scene. He hit the wall at incredible speed and skated along the barrier for what must have seemed like an eternity for the Scot.
Vamos a ver. Ahí está amarillo ya. Ahora, ¿por qué sales amarillo? Porque terminó la carrera. Porque ya terminó la carrera, entonces, ¿por qué Franchitti no disminuye la velocidad?
He took responsibility for the crash, and it's fair to say that it wasn't one of his finest moments. It's back to street tracks for this next shocker, which was courtesy of Felix Rosenqvist's slightly wonky Arrow McLaren car. The Swede was having an uneventful race around the fan favorite and now unused Belle Isle track in Detroit, but that all changed in dramatic fashion. At one of the worst places on the track for a failure to occur, Rosenqvist's McLaren had, to quote the team, a mechanical fault. But it just so happened to be one of the scariest mechanical faults ever, as the car accelerated at full speed straight towards the wall. He was sent headfirst at disturbing speed into the tires, and he hit them so hard that his car lifted them out of the way and proceeded to smash into the concrete wall behind them. The force was so strong, he moved the concrete wall back a few inches and landed on top of the tires.
Oh, big crash! Felix Rosenqvist! Oh my goodness! I bet I know where that is. I think that's onto the back straightaway, and what we've seen in years past is a driver hitting the right front on the concrete wall at the apex.
Felix was stuck in the car for far longer than he would have liked and missed several races due to concussion, but he was lucky to even survive after this horror crash. There's often a debate in motorsports between which is better, rolling starts or standing starts, and while IndyCar currently uses rolling starts, once upon a time they tried the opposite, and it's safe to say that this one in particular was a little messy. In 2014, Sebastien Bourdais qualified on pole for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course race, giving him a fantastic chance at the win, but he blew it before he even got going. He stalled on the grid right as the lights went out and left himself stationary in the worst possible place. Carlos Munoz drove straight into the back of him, wrecking both cars. But a split second later, Michael Aleshin caused an even bigger wreck when he plowed into the stationary car in a horrific impact. Debris was sent flying as Saavedra's car was lifted into the air due to the sheer force of the hit. It was one wild ride for the three drivers, but luckily none were seriously injured. The Portland Grand Prix is known to have the potential to throw a massive metaphorical spanner in the works of the IndyCar Championship every year, as it is one of the last races on the calendar and features a tricky layout. And in 2018, it did exactly that. Just after the infamous Turn 1 chicane, all hell broke loose when James Hinchcliffe spun and collected multiple other cars. Marco Andretti had an awkward encounter and ended up being thrown over another car and flipping over into the dirt. Championship contender Scott Dixon got caught up in the melee as cars went flying, narrowly missing helmets as they clambered over each other. Somehow Dixon escaped with his car intact, but the others weren't so lucky. As I mentioned earlier, Texas Motor Speedway has a tendency to produce incredible side-by-side action at seriously high speeds, and in 2017 it did not disappoint. Halfway through the race, James Hinchcliffe was battling fiercely with Tony Kanaan, deciding to go 3 wide around the high-speed banking. But the fun faded quickly when Kanaan drove up onto Hinchcliffe and knocked his car off balance, sending him into an uncontrollable spin. Hinchcliffe hit the wall in a nasty crash, triggering a pileup behind as other drivers tried to avoid the carnage. Sparks were flying and flames were igniting as multiple cars smashed into each other, causing one of the wildest moments in recent IndyCar history.
That's the big one. Big crash.
Oh boy. Hildebrand, Jones, Hinchcliffe.
It's rare that so many cars get wiped out in just one crash, but in IndyCar, anything can happen. And in 2003, driver Billy Boat found this out too when this mega wreck took place on the famed oval. At the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the outer walls aren't the only thing you can hit. No, there's something a lot worse. Boat lost control of his car while exiting Turn 4 and spun uncontrollably, and what happened next was shocking. The pit lane attenuator is designed to improve safety by keeping the people in the pit lane separate from the racetrack, and that's all well and good until a driver plows into it. It's safe to say that Boat would have felt the effects the next morning. And last on our list is perhaps the most destructive crash of all. This sickening impact came during the 2005 race at the much-loved Chicagoland Speedway, where the speeds used to get quite literally out of control. Ryan Briscoe was racing side by side with Alex Barron, and when Barron moved down the track, there was nothing Briscoe could do. The two made contact, sending Briscoe skywards over Barron's car and nose first towards the catch fencing. He hit the wall and fence at a horrific angle. His car split in two as it ripped through a post in the fence, leaving a huge hole. And to make matters worse, his car was carrying a lot of fuel, causing it to explode on impact. The cockpit began spinning violently down the track and was narrowly missed by his teammate Scott Dixon. It took Briscoe over 2 months to recover fully from this one, but at least he lived to tell the tale. And with that, we have the 20 worst IndyCar crashes ever. From high-speed oval pileups to scary street course shunts, these IndyCar crashes demonstrate the tenacity and drive of these modern-day gladiators, who are willing to put it all on the line each and every race. Leave a comment letting us know which crash you thought was the most insane and tell us if we missed any. Please smash the like button and subscribe for more motorsports content. This has been Racers Reverie. See you in the next video.